Route 57 is an 11.6km tram route in Melbourne, running from the Elizabeth Street terminus in the city to West Maribyrnong, winding its way through North Melbourne, Flemington, Ascot, Vale and Maribyrnong along the way. As of December 2025, Route 57 is operated out of Essendon Depot using entirely Z-Class trams, although as we will later see, that is soon to change in the near future. The beginning of Route 57 is at the corner of Flinders Street and Elizabeth Street in the CBD, sharing the terminus of Route 19 and 59. The intersection features one of the most recognisable locations in Melbourne, being Flinders Street Station, with the Flinders Street Station clock tower aligning to the centre of Elizabeth Street. Route 35, 70 and 75 run east-west along Flinders Street. This intersection also features what is known as a scramble crossing, which is a pedestrian crossing that allows pedestrians to cross in any direction at the same time. The purpose of a scramble crossing is to handle high volumes of pedestrian traffic, as this is one of the busiest intersections in the CBD. The Elizabeth Street terminus features 2 tracks and a scissor crossover just north of the terminus, allowing trams to arrive and depart on either side. A problem quickly emerges, however, as 3 routes terminate here, but there are only 2 tracks. As a result, it is not uncommon for there to be a long lineup of trams waiting to terminate, especially during the peak, and as a result, trams often depart almost immediately after arrival to reduce tram congestion on Elizabeth Street. The terminus is also known as the Sir Robert Risson Tram Terminus, named after Robert Risson, who was a former Australian engineer, soldier and tramway administrator. The Elizabeth Street terminus has received some backlash over the years due to the terminus not being an accessible platform stop. Heading north from Flinders Street, Route 57 crosses Collins Street, which carries Route 11, 12, 48 and 109. Route 57 also passes the Block Arcade, which is a Victorian-era architecture-style walk-through arcade constructed from 1891 to 1893. A few hundred metres further north, Route 57 arrives at Bourke Street, crossing Route 86 and 96. Here we see the Bourke Street Mall, a car-free walk-through mall, which may also be the most recognisable street in Melbourne. The Bourke Street Mall features some of the most prestige icons in Melbourne, such as the Royal Arcade, the Myer Christmas windows, and the General Post Office, which we will come back to in a minute. Bourke Street Mall is generally supposed to be free of cars, with the exception of emergency vehicles and maintenance vehicles, which are permitted to drive through the mall at no more than 10 km an hour. There are no entry signs here stating that motorists must not enter the mall. However, similar to the Montague Street Bridge, some motorists either ignore or don't notice the signs and drive through anyway, generally without causing issue. The mall does, however, feature bollards, which were installed in 2017, following the Bourke Street Mall car attack, which unfortunately resulted in the loss of 6 people. Anyway, before continuing north, you will notice that on the corner of Elizabeth Street and Bourke Street is the General Post Office, which is the original post office of Melbourne. The post office was constructed in stages over the course of 46 years, spanning from 1861 to 1907, and remained in use as a post office until 2001, when it was converted into what is now an H&M clothing store outlet. If you look closely here, you will notice that just outside the General Post Office is what is known as the 0 point. The 0 point is the exact point as to which measurements to and from Melbourne are measured to or from. Infrastructure such as road signage that lists the distance to Melbourne is referring to this exact point. Anyway, where were we again? That's right, Route 57. Continuing north from Bourke Street, Route 57 passes by the Emporium and crosses the city's main bus corridor, being Lonsdale Street. Route 57 then arrives at Melbourne Central Station, where passengers are able to change for City Loop train services, as well as trains at the nearby State Library Station. Route 30 and 35 also cross here, running east-west along Trobe Street. Located on the ground level is the Melbourne Central Shopping Centre, a large shopping complex located in the heart of the CBD. The centre is the former location of the Melbourne Museum before it moved out to Carlton, as well as Coop's Shot Tower, the latter of which still exists and has been incorporated into the shopping centre, being surrounded by what is known as the Melbourne Central Cone. A few hundred metres north, Route 57 arrives at the Queen Victoria Market, a public food, produce and flea market which first opened in 1878. The market currently attracts up to 10 million visitors annually. The heritage building located on the corner of Elizabeth Street and Victoria Street is known as the Meat and Fish Hall, which is the oldest part of the market, having been completed in 1868. This is also the site of a major intersection of Victoria Street and Elizabeth Street, with the north-south line on Elizabeth Street crossing the east-west line on Victoria Street. This intersection was recently upgraded in October 2025, which connected what were then two separate lines on Victoria Street together by linking them across Elizabeth Street. At this intersection, Route 19 and 59 continue north along Elizabeth Street to their eventual junction at the Haymarket roundabout, while Route 57 takes the south to west curve. However, this is far from the final mention of Route 59. The north to east curve, as well as the line heading east on Victoria Street, is not used by any regular route, and is a line that connects Elizabeth Street to Swanston Street. This line is usually only used for tram transfers, as well as diversions of Route 1, 6 and 58. There is the possibility of this line being used by a route in the future, but as of now, this line remains unused by any regular route. Entering Victoria Street, Route 57 leaves the Hoddle Grid, running alongside the northern edge of the Queen Victoria Market. The next stop that we arrive at is Peel Street, where passengers may change for Route 58 trams. However, this is not straightforward, as the stop is located closer to Elizabeth Street than it is to Peel Street. This stop used to be located at the intersection of Peel Street and Victoria Street. However, it was relocated to its current position in October 2025 when it was rebuilt as a Centre Road platform stop. The reason for rebuilding this stop is to prepare for the introduction of G-Class trams, which are set to enter service on Route 57 in mid-2026. There is also a crossover located here, allowing trams to reverse direction early in case of a disruption or late running. Following the Peel Street stop, Route 57 continues to run alongside the Queen Victoria Market and then finally crosses Peel Street and Route 58. Route 57 continues west along Victoria Street, before eventually arriving at Chetwynd Street. This intersection is completely normal, and totally is not known for a particular video that was made here featuring this location. Anyway, on a serious note, this stop, along with several other stops in the North Melbourne area, are incredibly short safety zone stops, barely managing to fit a Z-Class tram. While we are on the topic of safety zones, it's probably time to put the emphasis on the safety of safety zones. Safety zone stops are centre road stops wedged between the traffic lane and the tram track. Safety zone stops are the worst type of tram stop in Melbourne, as passengers are forced to wait in a narrow strip, with the only thing separating the waiting passengers from the road traffic being these metal railings. These railings are, surprise surprise, not sufficient protection for waiting passengers. As you can see here, an almost certainly distracted driver drove through the safety zone, ripping out several metal railings, the tram stop sign, as well as the traffic light. Anyway, as I was saying earlier, this stop is not long enough for the length of G-Class trams, and as a result, this stop is going to be combined with the previous stop at Howard Street in the future to allow G-Class trams to run on this route. This will likely be done when hook turns are introduced in Victoria Street at Howard Street, Chetwynd Street and Leveson Street. Now that we have discussed complete and utter safety zone chaos, we arrive at Errol Street. Errol Street is the heart of the North Melbourne area, the suburb of which is home to historic Victorian-era terrace housing, a diverse cultural and arts scene, a common theme within the inner suburbs, historical buildings, and of course its beloved AFL team, the North Melbourne Kangaroos. The suburb was originally named Hotham and was historically a working-class area, the latter of which is evident in the western portion of the suburb, particularly near the CityLink tollway. Errol Street is the main hub for the suburb, with the street being lined with several cafes, restaurants and bars, with the North Melbourne Town Hall towering over the street. Following the historic Errol Street, Route 57 briefly snakes its way into Queensberry Street before turning into Abbotsford Street. Once entering Abbotsford Street, Route 57 arrives at Arden Street. Arden Street is the closest stop to the nearby Arden Station, located in the Metro Tunnel. Arden Station is a short walk and passengers can change for trains on the Cranbourne, Pakenham and Sunbury lines. You can also find the Arden Street Oval here, which is home to the North Melbourne Kangaroos AFL team. Continuing another 750 metres north along Abbotsford Street, Route 57 arrives at the Abbotsford Street Interchange, where Route 57 meets Route 59 for the second time, and also comes into close proximity of Route 58 once again. The Abbotsford Street Interchange is a major tram interchange located at the intersection of Flemington Road and Abbotsford Street, served by Route 57, 58 and 59. The interchange is overlooked by the nearby Royal Children's Hospital, with Royal Park also being located on the north side of Flemington Road. There are two stops that combine to form this interchange, the one in Abbotsford Street, served by Route 57, and one in Flemington Road, served by Route 58 and 59. This is probably one of the most unusual tram stops in Melbourne, as although there are Centre Road platform stops here, the platforms are not actually accessible and are instead ground level stops. It should also be noted that only the stop in Abbotsford Street is actually called Abbotsford Street Interchange, with the stop in Flemington Road taking its name from the Royal Children's Hospital. The stop in Flemington Road used to be named Abbotsford Street Interchange as well. However, it was renamed to Royal Children's Hospital when this stop was upgraded to an accessible platform stop in the early 2010s. There is a crossover here in Abbotsford Street, allowing Route 57 trams to terminate early in case of a disruption. Route 59 trams can also terminate here using the crossover in Abbotsford Street or Flemington Road, with outbound Route 59 trams also being able to use the crossover in the Royal Park Light Rail. Route 58 trams can also reverse direction here by using the crossover in Flemington Road or the one on the Royal Park Light Rail. It is a relatively rare occurrence for Route 57 trams to terminate here, however, as Route 57 trams are able to divert via Flemington Road along Route 59, rejoining the normal route at the Queen Victoria Market. The opposite is also true, with Route 59 trams being able to divert via Abbotsford Street along Route 57. Route 59 trams diverting via Abbotsford Street presents an unusual situation, where B-class trams run on a section of track that they don't normally traverse otherwise. This is the only time that stop announcements on Route 57 between Queen Victoria Market and Abbotsford Street Interchange can be heard, and that is until the introduction of G-class trams. Abbotsford Street Interchange is also the location of the driver changeovers on Route 57 and 58 for drivers from Essendon Depot. Fun fact, the Abbotsford Street Interchange is the location of the first ever video on this channel. Anyway, where were we? Oh, that's right, Route 57. After departing the Abbotsford Street Interchange, Route 57 turns northwest into Flemington Road, briefly sharing track with Route 59 once again. Route 57 only runs along Flemington Road for about 600 metres, sharing only one stop with Route 59 at Melrose Street. Following Melrose Street, we arrive at the major intersection of Flemington Road, Mount Alexander Road, Elliot Avenue and Racecourse Road. At this intersection, Route 59 as well as Route 57D trams heading to Essendon Depot continue northwest into Mount Alexander Road, while Route 57 trams turn west into Racecourse Road. Route 57 and 59 trams can terminate here using this crossover. However, as we will later see, this is a relatively rare occurrence. And contrary to what you might think, this is still not the last that we will see of Route 59. After turning into Racecourse Road, Route 57 runs through a more industrial area of North Melbourne, with a tram stop located at Boundary Road. Boundary Road is the closest stop on the route to the nearby Flemington Bridge railway station, located on the Upfield line. From here, the line descends down a small hill, passing under the Upfield line as well as the CityLink tollway. The bridge that carries the Upfield line over Racecourse Road is much like the Montague Street Bridge, which sees its fair share of collisions with tall vehicles. The clearance of this bridge is only 4 metres for road traffic and 3.7 metres for the tram line. Albeit, as we will soon come across, this isn't the end of low bridges and truck collisions. Trams usually need to slow down while passing under this bridge due to the pantograph on the tram being pushed down from the low clearance. Continuing west along Racecourse Road, we have now entered the suburb of Flemington. Much like North Melbourne, Flemington features Victorian-era terrace housing. The suburb is also home to several housing commission towers, which were constructed in the 1960s and are located just off Racecourse Road near CityLink. Flemington is most well known for the annual Melbourne Cup, a horse race which is held annually on the first Tuesday of November at the nearby Flemington Racecourse, which we will discuss later on. As we get back to Route 57, the line passes through the main shopping hub in Flemington along Racecourse Road, where for the first time we encounter mixed traffic running. The shops along Racecourse Road aren't particularly interesting. It's just a line of shops of necessities with the occasional restaurant and cafe. At the western end of the Racecourse Road shops, we see the other and more notorious low bridge on Racecourse Road, this time with a lower clearance of 3.7 metres. This bridge carries trains on the Maribyrnong line, with Newmarket station also being located above Racecourse Road. Similar to Montague Street, there are several warning signs on the approach to the bridge warning drivers of the 3.7 metre clearance. Just before the bridge, there are overheight vehicle bays, allowing overheight vehicles to stop and call for assistance. However, these are often ignored, with overheight vehicles usually crashing into the bridge. Now continuing on the other side of the Maribyrnong line, we return to a dedicated tram lane again as Racecourse Road widens. Route 57 then arrives at stop 26, Newmarket Station. The Newmarket Plaza can also be found at this stop, which is a small shopping centre that features a Woolworths, Chemist Warehouse and a news agency. Oh, and there's also a bar here as well. Following Newmarket Station, the line passes Smithfield Road and continues west along Racecourse Road for another 300 metres, before arriving at the roundabout of Epsom Road, Racecourse Road and Ascot Vale Road. This roundabout is not the safest, with motorists more often than not dashing across the tram tracks to beat the tram through the roundabout. From here, the line turns northwest into Epsom Road and continues along Epsom Road for 200 metres until it arrives at Flemington Racecourse. Flemington Racecourse is a horse racing track in the suburb of Flemington. The racecourse has a capacity of 120,000 patrons and hosts several horse races events throughout the year, with the most notable being the annual Melbourne Cup. The race has been held annually at Flemington Racecourse since 1861 and is held on the first Tuesday of November. The race is such a big deal that Victoria even has a public holiday dedicated for the event. The race usually attracts over 1 million live viewers on TV and is also known for the fashion statements made by attendees to the race. The race is also locally known as the race that stops the nation. As of December 2025, the official name of the race is currently known as the Lexus Melbourne Cup due to naming rights from the car company. Following on from Flemington Racecourse, the line takes a dip as it passes under the Flemington Racecourse railway line. Now, this is an interesting piece of history in the tramways and railways, as this was the site of the first ever tram square. That's right, this used to be a level crossing, well, over 100 years ago. This was also the first tram square to be grade separated, as the level crossing here was removed back in 1925. A short distance to the west along the Flemington Racecourse line is Showgrounds Station, although the station cannot be accessed from Epsom Road. The station is only in use when there is an event on at the nearby Melbourne Showgrounds, which we will talk about shortly. Shortly after passing under the Flemington Racecourse line, the line passes the Showgrounds village, a small shopping hub similar to the Newmarket Plaza. From here, Route 57 continues northwest on Epsom Road as far as Union Road, where it then turns north into Union Road. At this point, it is worth mentioning that we have already entered the suburb of Ascot Vale. Ascot Vale isn't a particularly interesting suburb, with the suburb mostly consisting of small family homes. The suburb is home to the Melbourne Showgrounds, but that's really the only notable landmark in this suburb. Around the corner in Union Road is the Melbourne Showgrounds tram stop. This stop is the most recent stop to have been upgraded on Route 57 as of December 2025. The stop is a centre road platform stop with two faces. On the north side of the tram stop, we come across an unusual section of triple track. This section contains what is known as the Showgrounds Loop. The Showgrounds Loop is used to stable and terminate special event trams that run while there are events on at the nearby Melbourne Showgrounds. It is here that we are introduced to Route 57A, a special event-only route that operates a modified Route 57 service. It starts out pretty simple, originating at the Elizabeth Street terminus and running north along Elizabeth Street to the Queen Victoria Market. But here, things get strange, as instead of following Route 57 into Victoria Street through North Melbourne, Route 57A trams continue straight and run via Flemington Road along Route 59. These trams rejoin the normal route at Melrose Street, and from here follow the normal Route 57 to stop 33 Melbourne Showgrounds. These services are also operated with B-class trams instead of Z-class trams. This is the only time where B-class trams operate on Route 57, and you can check when the Route 57A will next run on the Yarra Trams website. The service usually operates when there are events on at Melbourne Showgrounds and occasionally Flemington Racecourse. This service can actually provide a shortcut for commuters, as if you wanted to get from Newmarket Station to the Royal Melbourne Hospital, what you will need to do is take a Route 57 tram from Newmarket Station and change at Melrose Street for Route 59, or at the Abbotsford Street Interchange for Route 58 or 59. The Route 57A operating via Flemington Road means that this journey is possible without having to change trams, which is convenient if you happen to be on one. Now back to the Showgrounds Loop. The Showgrounds Loop features 3 tracks, with the westbound track being the most simple, being used by trams to West Maribyrnong. The centre track is used by trams heading towards the city, whilst the eastern track is unused. The eastern track is only used when the centre track is being used to stable and terminate Route 57A trams during special events. The centre track is protected by concrete barriers and can also be used to stable defective trams if required. The arrangement of the access around the loop is a bit unusual, as the loop cannot be directly accessed from the southern end, with trams being required to pass the loop and then reverse direction through the crossover to enter the loop. This arrangement is fairly new, however, as the old Showgrounds Loop featured a very different arrangement. On the old arrangement, the eastern track actually used to be the loop and was not accessible from the northern end in the southbound direction. Stapling trams in the middle of the road on the eastern track would cause traffic congestion and would create a hazardous situation for motorists. There also used to be a crossover around the corner in Epsom Road, which was used to terminate Route 57A trams prior to the renewal works taking place, with the loop being exclusively used for stapling trams. Continuing north along Union Road, we return to mixed traffic running, and Route 57 passes through the Union Road shopping precinct, the main hub of shops in Ascot Vale. A short while after, we arrive at the intersection of Union Road and Maribyrnong Road, where Route 57 trams turn into the line in Maribyrnong Road, with Route 82 entering from the east. Route 82 is one of 2 tram routes that do not pass through the CBD, with the other being the Route 78. The Route 82 is also operated out of Essendon Depot, using entirely Z-class trams as well. Route 57 shares the track with Route 82 for most of the entire remainder of the route. Route 82 was actually almost closed twice, once in 1980 and once again in 1993. Anyway, back to Route 57. The line along Maribyrnong Road continues west for about 1 kilometre, passing by Bowen Street, before arriving at Epsom Road. And yes, that's the same Epsom Road from earlier. The intersection of Maribyrnong Road and Epsom Road doesn't appear to feature anything out of the ordinary, but that's where the door of weird tram movements busts wide open. You may remember that back at Flemington Road and Racecourse Road, I said, contrary to what you might think, this is still not the last that we will see of Route 59, and that is all thanks to this crossover right here. This crossover allows Route 59 trams to make a long and unusual diversion, diverting via Racecourse Road along Route 57 to Epsom Road, then reversing direction here in Union Road, and diverting via Maribyrnong Road along Route 82, resuming the normal route at Moonee Ponds Junction. However, this diversion is quite rare and doesn't happen very often. The opposite is also true, with Route 57 trams being able to divert via Mount Alexander Road and Maribyrnong Road along Route 59 and 82. The 57 diversion is a bit more odd, however, as it requires diverted trams to use the Route 82 terminus at Moonee Ponds Junction to reverse direction. When this diversion occurs, Route 82 trams terminate at the previous stop at Chalker Street, reversing direction using the crossover in Ascot Vale Road instead. This diversion is more common than the Route 59 diversion, but is still quite rare. Continuing another 300 metres west of Epsom Road, we arrive at Maribyrnong Park, as well as the Maribyrnong River. This was the original terminus of the line until 1940, when it was extended to its current terminus at West Maribyrnong. The reason for this extension is something that we will discover a bit later on. As this was the former terminus, it's time to talk about route numbering. When route numbers were first introduced, the route from the city to the Maribyrnong River was allocated as Route 54. The route number was changed to 57 when the West Maribyrnong extension opened in 1940, with Route 57 previously being allocated to a tram that was part of the Footscray tramways, with the original Route 57 running from Footscray Station to its terminus at the intersection of Gordon Street and Western Highway, near the current Footscray Hospital. This route is now part of Route 82 and is the only remaining route of the Footscray tramways. Route 57 was reallocated to its current route in 1940, with Route 54 initially being retained for short working runs to the Maribyrnong River, although these later ceased, and with route suffixes being introduced, Route 54 is no longer used. There is still a crossover here, allowing Route 57 and 82 trams to reverse direction here if required. We are now running on the 1940 extension, and the first point of interest is this bridge over the Maribyrnong River. This bridge has an unusual history. When the line was extended to West Maribyrnong in 1940, a new bridge was constructed over the Maribyrnong River. This bridge was a wooden trestle bridge, and was a tram-only bridge, with road traffic having its own separate bridge to the north. This was an unusual sight, and despite the bridge being intended for trams, it was frequently used as a shortcut by pedestrians, most notably by school students. It wasn't actually illegal for pedestrians to use this bridge, despite how narrow it was. Some locals raised concerns with the safety of the bridge for pedestrians, and rightly so. In this photo, there are 3 points where pedestrians could walk across the bridge. One on the northern end of the bridge, one on the southern end of the bridge, and one in the middle between the tram tracks. The concerning thing with this bridge, other than how narrow the pedestrian walkways are, is that on the tracks there was absolutely nothing between the sleepers. This means that it was possible for someone to fall between the sleepers and into the river, and this did occur in 1950, when a man who was walking across the bridge fell into the gap between a pair of sleepers and drowned in the river. Not long after this occurred, pedestrians were finally banned from using the tram-only bridge, but that didn't last very long, as in 1967, the bridge was rebuilt into the bridge that currently stands as of December 2025. The bridge was recently strengthened in 2025 to prepare for the introduction of G-Class trams on Route 57 and 82. After crossing the Maribyrnong River, Maribyrnong Road becomes Raleigh Road, with the line continuing west along Raleigh Road. It is at this point that we have now entered the suburb of Maribyrnong. Maribyrnong is known for several attractions, such as the Maribyrnong River, a former explosive factory, more on that later, and of course, Highpoint Shopping Centre. Maribyrnong is one of the most demographic diverse places in Victoria, with a large number of residents here being born overseas. Continuing west along Raleigh Road, the line passes Van Ness Avenue, where the nearby Maribyrnong Reserve can be found, which features a small memorial for Australian soldiers who fought in war overseas. After passing Van Ness Avenue, the line continues west for another 600 metres, climbing up a hill until it passes Randall Street. At Randall Street, Raleigh Road curves slightly southwest, continuing for another 230 metres to Rosamond Road. Rosamond Road is where we shift from mixed traffic running to a dedicated right-of-way on the north side of Raleigh Road. A few hundred metres south on Rosamond Road is Highpoint Shopping Centre, the main hub of the Maribyrnong area, as well as a major hub for the middle western suburbs, as Highpoint is one of the largest shopping centres in Australia. On the north side of Raleigh Road, we get a glimpse of the former Maribyrnong Explosive Factory. The Maribyrnong Explosive Factory was the largest explosive factory in Australia when it operated. The factory was originally the site of the Maribyrnong Racecourse from 1892 to 1908, until the construction of what was known as the Maribyrnong Cordite Factory began. The factory was completed in 1911, while the construction of the factory was a concern among locals who were worried about a potential explosion occurring, which may or may not have occurred later on. The factory experienced a boom in workload during the First World War, with the factory's expansion continuing following the conclusion of the war. In October 1940, workers had protested due to the lack of transport to access the factory, and as a result, this led to the extension of the tram line from the Maribyrnong River to the current West Maribyrnong terminus, and was originally just a single track line, and was constructed in just 2 months. The line was later duplicated in 1942, and was constructed with some odd measures, such as removing existing tram track at the time to cater, as most manufacturing had stalled at the time due to the Second World War. The site also experienced several explosions, with the most notable occurring in 1940, when the pyrotechnic building exploded, injuring 4 people. The factory would play a significant role in wartime. However, the site was later closed in 1994 due to the residential development areas approaching the site. There have been proposals to redevelop the site, however, no progress has been made to the site due to the site containing hazardous materials and contaminated soil. Most old buildings from the historical site are still visible, however, these do not appear to be in good condition and appear to have been covered with graffiti in some areas, and some also have broken windows. Today, a small portion of the site is still used by the Department of Defence, which is located on Cordite Avenue near Central Park Avenue. If you would like to learn more about the Maribyrnong Explosive Factory, Philip Mallis has a 2-part video explaining the site, which I will leave a link to in the description if you would like to check it out. Anyway, on a less explosive note, let's get back to the final leg of Route 57. Raleigh Road curves slightly west again, with the tram line now having its own right of way on the north side of Raleigh Road. The line continues for another 350 metres west of Rosamond Road to West's Road, where we say goodbye to Route 82, as it turns into the line that runs behind the Highpoint Homemaker Centre. A point of interest here is this platform stop just off Raleigh Road on Route 82. Do you notice anything odd here? If you take a closer look, you will notice that this platform stop is only accessible by a step, meaning that it's not actually an accessible platform stop. I have no idea why the stop was constructed like this, but it may be due to the steep angle that the ramp would be at, as the stop is built on a steep slope. This line also leads to Hampstead Road, which is where the site of the new Maidstone tram depot is, which is due to come into operation when G-Class trams begin service in mid-2026. When this happened, the operation of Route 57 and 82 will be transferred from Essendon Depot to Maidstone Depot. There is also a crossover just east of West's Road, allowing Route 57 and 82 trams to terminate here if required. A quick thing to note here is this bus stop on the north side of Raleigh Road. This has got to be one of the worst bus stops in Melbourne, as you are forced to stand on a small strip of dirt wedged between the road and the tram tracks, and the only way to access the bus stop is by crossing Raleigh Road. There is no signalised pedestrian crossing here, and the nearby roundabout means that there is a constant stream of traffic through here, and as a result it is not unusual to have to wait over 5 minutes just to have a chance to cross the road. After passing by West's Road, Raleigh Road becomes Cordite Avenue, and Route 57 continues for another 400 metres west along Cordite Avenue to the terminus at West Maribyrnong. The terminus is a single-track ground-level stop laid in concrete and is located near the intersection of Cordite Avenue and Central Park Avenue. This is also the site of the portion of the explosive factory that is still owned by the Department of Defence. There actually used to be a second siding here, however this was removed in 2000 when the terminus was laid into concrete. This is the westernmost point on the Melbourne tram network, meaning that no tram in Melbourne travels further west than this point. The terminus is only one track, meaning that if a second tram arrives while the terminus is already occupied, it must wait for the tram that is already in the terminus to depart before it can enter the terminus. There have been calls in recent years, mostly by the Public Transport Users Association, to extend the Route 57 further west to either Avondale Heights or East Keilor. There are no big barriers to building the extension, so it is likely that it will be eventually built at some point in the future. However, there is no official government movement on the idea at this moment. So after all of that, we have finally made it to West Maribyrnong. If you have made it this far and you enjoyed this video, feel free to like and subscribe if you have not already done so. I really cannot thank you enough if you have made it, so thank you so much for watching.